I was muted.
Ms. Graham?
Here.
And Costa?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Ms. Atkins. Just some housekeeping measures, some procedures for our public comments and conducting this meeting. Board members, when you're not speaking, we ask that you remember to mute your microphones. This meeting will be conversational. You don't have to raise your hand to speak. To the public, you may have noticed that your audio is muted. There are several hosts of this meeting who are managing speaker access and will turn on public microphones when it is your time to speak. Last week, we asked the public to make a request by email if they wish to speak on the agenda or non-agenda items. Those who have submitted their names will be given a chance to speak as scheduled. We thank the public for their interest, and your input is very important. Board members, has everyone received the agenda and supporting documents for today's meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. With regard to the agenda or procedures for conducting today's business, are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll give you a few minutes to peruse the July 15th, 2020 meeting notes. Do I hear anything on the approval of minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
All right. So moved and seconded by Ms. Graham. All in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. That now takes us to the ethics officer's budget and the budget report. Mr. Floyd, would you please present your report at this time?
Mr. Floyd, you are muted.
Okay, there we are. It's been a busy 2 months since we last met. We canceled the August meeting because it was in conflict with the election. That was on election day. It also gave the staff time to do some extra work. We, as stated in the report, we've spent a lot of time and research in the last 2 months dealing with procedures, which we'll talk about a little bit later in agenda item 7. Lucy and I have both been through training as employees for the city. We received 4 complaints, because I received a 4th one when I was working on the agenda. If you look at the monthly issue report, there was 1 complaint with regard to the Black Lives Matter mural. The complaint did not allege any misuse of funds per se. The complaint was that it was not done in the manner that the caller thought was appropriate in terms of having a public discussion. That was generally the nature of the complaint. And I discussed it with the board attorney, and we determined that it didn't meet the elements for legal sufficiency. Any questions about that call?
Floyd, do we know if the city actually spent money on that, or if it was done by volunteers, or do we know anything about it back in terms of background?
Unofficially, both. City spent some money, and then the employees, from what I understand, just in line with their normal duties. Some of them worked on it. And there may have, I can't remember whether there was some volunteerism or not.
And a follow-up, do we know if there was any discussion of elected officials about doing this, or was this just done at a staff level?
My
The decision to
understanding,
do it.
my understanding was that was done at the staff level. I would have to go back and confirm it if you wish.
No, I'm fine.
Yeah, it was one of those things that was heavily scrutinized by the media and everybody else. Second complaint, the other three complaints that you see there, all involve issues that we would find legal sufficiency for if they were in Tallahassee. But all three were in other cities and they were referencing issues from other cities. Apparently they Googled and found us and called for help. So unfortunately, I was not able to help them. So any question about the other three complaints? With regard to the budget, you'll see,
Mr. Chair, to close out the monthly issue report, I would move that the board accept the staff recommendation to close all four of those complaints.
Yep, here a second.
I'll second.
All right. It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Floyd?
Thank you. With regard to the budget, you can see it's been a busy 2 months. Some of it was catch up. It wasn't all in those 2 months. Some of it was catch up and some of it, in John's case, it was doing what we agreed to do, which is backtrack and pay him the difference from 125 to the 250 that the board approved. You see Miss Menace, Attorney Menace. Some of you have been involved, so you know what she's been. I think she had a week-long session. That's a part of that one. We'll speak about, there's a contract with Integrity Group, and we'll speak briefly about that for as much as we can say. And we paid a court reporter for the last private session. Any questions about the budget?
I just have one, as far as the advertising, it's year to date and with us, I guess now having, approximately $74, what was, that used for? Like what type of advertising?
Excuse me, Mr. Smith,
Yes,
the $74 available budget left. The
Correct.
only expense for advertising was the 1925 that was done when we were searching for
no ethics officer.
employee. So
Okay.
the $74 is not an expense, it's balance.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was just saying that. I was looking at the year-to-date expenses of 1925, but if that was for the advertising for the positions, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions regarding the budget?
Question. We have a negative in the available budget for salaries. Why is that? What's happened and how are we going to cure that?
May I address it, Mr. Floyd?
Yes, ma'am.
There was a month where we had 2 ethics officers. And also, that extra expense of like 5 or 6 weeks we had before Julie left is what kind of put us behind, but we're under budget on the whole.
Okay.
Like, so they told me before, rather than change it on a monthly thing, that I should just go by the bottom line. Well, I have since found out that I can put my foot down, and if I have to, I'll have Dwight put his down as well. And we'll get them to change it so that we don't have negatives in the future. But that'll be after the report you'll get next month that'll have all 12 months in it. But from then on, we will get them to adjust our amended budget so that we don't have negative balances.
On any of these line items, because there are several negative balances. Is that going to apply to all of them, Lucy? Okay,
If you'll look at the bottom number, we're $100,000 to the good.
I see that. Okay,
Yeah, basically the line items are just really just estimates in terms of allocation. But what we have to be most concerned about is the bottom line, because we can reallocate to balance the line items.
so we're going to have that cured by our next board meeting, Lucy?
It'll be after we do the annual budget report. You know, that one where I list all 12 months and the total of everything. It won't start in new fiscal year, which is October.
Okay. Thank you for answering my question. I appreciate it.
I'm actually not sure I mind the negatives because it kind of points out where, you know, something, we had an unusual expense one month that we didn't anticipate at the beginning of the year. As long as our bottom line is positive.
Absolutely. But anytime I see a negative in any line on a budget, it raises
Right.
a concern.
Sure.
So thank you for explaining that we're going to get that fixed soon. Thank you.
Do we have any additional questions for Mr. Floyd concerning the budget or any other aspect of his report? Seeing none. I thank you, Mr. Floyd. Did you have anything additional you would like to add?
No, sir, I think we're good at this point.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. We will now move to public comment for agenda items. Mr. Floyd, do we have any speakers? And if so, who would be the first one?
Yes, sir, we have one speaker, Peter Butzing, who should be able to speak now. Peter, you want to give it a try? You all attendees. Not getting, let me try this another way. Peter, Peter, can you turn your mic on? I temporarily made him a board member so he can speak. Okay, there you go. Peter?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Technology, that's one of those things. If technology, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Sorry about that.
I
Okay,
promoted you
my name
to
is
board member.
Dean.
I promoted you to board member so you can speak, but don't get comfortable with it.
Thank you. So for the record, my name is Peter Butzing. I reside at 1628 Woodgate Way, and I'm here on behalf of Citizens for Ethics Reform. I wish to comment very briefly on 4 specific agenda items. Regarding agenda item 4, in the monthly issue report, we note that an inquiry of July 7th, where the independent ethics officer reviewed a call to the hotline with the city attorney, resulting in the conclusion that, quote, the call did not rise to the level of misuse of public position. While we do not disagree with that, we would remind the board that we faulted the previous ethics officer for her lack of independence from other city officials. and her making final determinations that should really be made by the full board, or at least by the board chairman. And going forward, we urge the board and its ethics officer to maintain its independence from the city. Regarding agenda item 6B, and specifically goal 12, recommendations to the city commission, we again ask that the ethics board pay particular attention to the city's lax definition, registration, disclosure, and regulation of lobbyists. We also recommend that this issue be addressed in a workshop where interested citizens, including our coalition, would have an opportunity to informally recommend changes, similar to the board's process for recommending changes to the ethics ordinance. I have also asked the independent ethics officer to distribute to the board documents relating to the Leon County Commission's effort to reform its lobby registration and disclosure ordinance. Those documents include a draft ordinance, which will be taken up at its October 13th meeting, and also a helpful summary of lobby ordinances from other jurisdictions in Florida. Regarding agenda item 6C, while we applaud the board for promoting the campaign contribution refund program, which has been something that we've brought up before, we're still disappointed that the objective for promoting the program through this year's election cycle is probably too late to have a meaningful impact. And last, I'd like to respond or comment regarding agenda item 8. We have reviewed the draft ethics guide revision to ensure that it properly reflects the language of the enrolled section 2 of the recently passed ethics ordinance. And unless we've misinterpreted that ordinance, we believe that the draft version of the revised ethics guide improperly reflects the gift and gratuities prohibition for city employees, that is, non-covered individuals. And this appears on page 2 of the draft ethics guide. The enrolled ordinance deletes the $100 gift limit for elected or appointed officials and deletes a $25 gift limit for other city employees. However, the draft handbook continues to refer to the $100 gift limit for non-covered individuals. I've included a footnote in my testimony, which I'm about to send to Mr. Floyd for his attention. And I also have suggested to Mr. Floyd a couple of typos that we found. Some of the documents were distributed. In conclusion, I thank you for the opportunity and urge you to consider our comments and suggestions during your deliberations today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your participation. It's always welcome, and we encourage you to continue to participate in future meetings.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank, you're recognized.
I'm afraid I missed Mr. Butzeen's first issue. Something that he was suggesting was being done at a staff level. It should be done at a board level, and I missed what this specific issue was.
Can you hear me? Is my mic on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, Richard, you kind of took care of that in your motion, and I applaud you for making the motion to approve the recommendations of the independent ethics officer. As it was provided in the handout, it appeared to me that, and to the coalition, that no further action would be required by the board. But you picked up on that through your motion. My main point is to continue to ensure that the independent ethics officer and independent ethics board be fully independent of the city staff.
And Peter, if I understood you correctly, when I said I spoke with the attorney, you thought I was talking about the city attorney?
That's what I thought. Yes, is that incorrect?
Yes, it was board attorney. It was John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
That's all right. It's all right.
You can scratch that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Does anyone, any other board members have any comments or questions of the Butzeen?
I would just say that this chart of local lobbying regulations this that he provided as attachment to in one of the emails. So the 6-page chart is actually very helpful, at least to me, because it goes through the definitions, the exemptions, and the complaint process for a half a dozen other jurisdictions. I think that's a wonderful resource document for us.
And I would agree, and we will make use of it.
Seeing no other questions, you said that was the only speaker that we had?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, at this time, I will move to agenda item number 6, old business. Attorney Reed, could you give us a report on the Inspector General ordinance?
Yes, Mr. Chair. You may recall that I think at our last meeting 2 months ago, we had discussed the Inspector General proposal is being put forward by the City Commission since we met last. I know Mr. Chairman did speak to the board. We made recommendations. We engaged in a discussion with not only the City Auditor, but also the City Attorney's Office, and voiced some of our concerns, particularly those involving confidentiality of ethics complaints that may inadvertently be filed with the Inspector General, and vice versa, whistleblower complaints that may be filed inadvertently with us. Those are two issues that maintain confidentiality through their initial steps, and we were concerned that by creating two separate groups that intake complaints that may be confusing to the public, we may inadvertently void confidentiality. So I do want to thank Mr. Chairman for being a part of that, and those members that participated. We have had an opportunity to discuss with the City Auditor, who will be the Inspector General, as well as the Deputy City Attorney, as far as procedures and steps going forward. One of the issues that we have floated is having a joint landing page, since there are some similarities to somebody wants to file an ethics complaint, somebody might have a sexual harassment claim, a whistleblower, etc. We looked at what's being done at FSU. The Office of the Inspector General FSU has a landing page which is called Ethics Point, and it's put forward by a group called Navex Global, and it essentially lists different areas where you can click, and then it would take you to a form where the person could file their complaint and it'd be kept confidential. That would be in addition to the hotline that we've discussed in the past. So that's just something we have discussed with staff. It's still at the staff level, and when we get further along in that discussion, we'll bring it back to the board. Another issue that we've discussed is procedures, particularly to protect the confidentiality of complaints that are inadvertently filed with the other board. We have, since the City Attorney actually did say at the last meeting that since we fall under the same umbrella of the City of Tallahassee, and it's simply a ministerial act, it's her opinion that it would not void confidentiality. We'd like to codify that in procedures, so if it ever comes up in the future, we could show a documentation that was done at the time to show that confidentiality was always intended to be preserved. And if a complaint that's supposed to be filed with them is filed with us, or vice versa, we're looking to put some type of time limitation upon receipt in which it must be turned over to the other office, and we would want our procedures to mirror theirs. So if they do 5 days, we do 5 days. If they do 20, we do 20. So that way we're all doing the same thing. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right. Do we have any questions for Attorney Reed?
Just one comment, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Herron.
I note here that there's draft language being prepared. I'd just like to make sure, and I know that'll come before the board, but I'd like to make sure that we provide, before we get to the board discussion, that's available and we have adequate opportunity for public input on that draft language.
Okay. I think that's an excellent idea. All right. Last month, Mr. Floyd introduced the idea of creating a strategic plan. He is asking for our help and our input to help create this plan. So, Mr. Floyd, you care to elaborate at this time?
Yes, and we spoke last time. We talked about plan, but as I worked with it and considered like contribution refund program, I started looking a little longer range because, at least from my perspective, planning is one of the most important things that you do. And really be effective with programs like that. Think ahead and plan ahead. So we want to put together strategies both short term, long term. I gave you a list of goals as best I identified them. They actually come from the ordinance. I broke them out. You may have an ordinance that says an employee has to take certain training before the first 60 days. Then they have to take training every 3 years, and they have to take a refresher in between. So I broke them out. I didn't keep all of that together. When we do the strategies, we may combine some of these. So course may cover more than one goal. Planned out, and have to figure out how to deal with the issue. Training wouldn't be as big an issue. For example, I have 2 classes, one this weekend, one next week online. I have a course, and if it was classroom, I could pick up the course and go teach it, and I feel pretty comfortable. But it's online, and I have to get used to doing it online. There are additional preparations, so especially the first time, it'll take more time. But even on those, it'll become rather routine after a while. What you used to do is work in the afternoons, weekends, Sundays, conducting training, and because we're talking about 3,000 employees every year being responsible for their training. Some of it will be online and some of it won't. Of course, we have investigations, and what I would say about that, almost assume that the ethics office is doing with an investigation. And I say it that way because it's supposed to be public. We'll never, when we aren't, or when we aren't, we would assume in our planning that their investigation. And asking you to do is look at that, make sure you agree with the goals stated or any other goals, any goal missing. And then behind that is a analysis, and which is a very common tool. And I'm just asking you to take the SWOT analysis, go into it, and answer the questions to the best of your ability from your perspective. And if you send that back to me, I'll compile that, turn it into data. I'll come back with strategies based on your feedback, and we can move forward with there without having a big workshop.
You have a timetable when you would like to have any recommendations returned to you?
End of the month.
All right, 15 days, huh? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Too long, you'll forget.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, on the page two of the document on the 3-year plan, I have
Yes.
a couple of comments, probably for the board. Actually 5. One is on goals 2 and 3. It cites the 180 days and the 60 days that I think are in the ordinance. Given what we've been going through recently with COVID, I am hesitant. I don't know why we necessarily need to repeat the ordinance language. It is what it is, but I think we might on both of those replace the days with as soon as possible, so that if something were to happen, we wouldn't be violating our own plan if we went to the 61st day because something was just shut down for some period of time. So that would be a comment. Also on from goals 2 to 6, I think it says conduct ethics training, and I would like for us to have a clear understanding that conducting could be either directly or indirectly. So it might be Mr. Floyd doing an in-person or an online session, or it might be something that he has developed where people can go and do it on their own time, or it might be something where we have volunteers or contractors who go and do it in lieu of Mr. Floyd, that it doesn't all fall. It doesn't mean that he has to personally appear at every one of those things, that there's a wide variety of ways of conducting, as long as we understand that. My third comment would be goals 5, 8, and 9. It appears to me there's a lot of overlap among those, and that might cause some confusion. So you've got in-depth training for city employees, required training for city employees, and refresher training for city employees. There might be a better way to organize that to make it clearer how those three interrelate. On goal 5, it says conduct in-depth annual ethics training. My understanding is in the past, a lot of that training the city provided, went out and hired contractors to do some of that training. So again, I don't know that it's something that Mr. Floyd needs to do for all city employees in every case. If the city wants to hire qualified contractors, maybe we should change in goal 5 the word conduct to the word ensure. Just make sure that it is provided to the city employees, that should be the board's goal, is to make sure that city employees get trained rather than to say we will do the training. And along those same lines, my last comment on goal 7, it says provide ethics training to candidates. I'm not sure that we can force a candidate to sit through our ethics training, so we might say offer ethics training to candidates, because if a candidate says, I don't know you guys, I don't know who you are, I don't like you, I don't trust you, you have a dishonest face herring, I'm not coming to anything that you're involved in, I don't know that we can make them do it. And that would be the end of my comments.
And he just gave an example I'd like to get.
All right. Any additional comments? I don't know if everyone had an opportunity for a deep dive into the document as of yet, but just from an initial review, does anyone else have any comments they'd like to add? Well, Mr. Aaron, I think those are excellent points. And Mr. Floyd, we will all return something to you, hopefully within the next 15 days. And then we look forward to seeing a draft after that. So we can make further comments or recommendations on that.
Appreciate it.
All right. And our last portion of old business, again, Mr. Floyd, you're supposed to give us an update on the campaign contribution refund program.
Yes, and the effort to identify and hire someone at this stage, I contacted who at these individuals have journalism majors, management, or people who have what we're for. Skill we're asking for, and I realized is that probably if this had been a quarter ago, I probably would have doing this. So look forward, that I would probably hire an intern to help me with something. I think there's a challenging project because a lot of people who give don't give with the idea of being back. That said, I did a little research in some places like Minnesota where they're actually successful with this in increasing the numbers with this program. But it'll take a little time to do a little more research, collect information on how the programs that are successful. So in strategic plan, I'm going to incorporate that. Should have been doing, and I want to get your feedback. One which is to do radio and just to make people aware of the program, because even though the campaign is pretty much over, people can still ask for a refund based on what they've given. And I think awareness is a first step in whatever we do going forward. I thought about, contacting a couple of stage 2, maybe 3, to between now and December 31st, make people aware of them and give them an opportunity if they've given to get some of their money back. And interested in hearing your thoughts on that part.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Herron, you recognize.
I really like the direction Mr. Floyd's going with this. The one thing I would probably add to this is during the campaign cycle, I think it would be worth putting a real focus on the candidates, since through their campaigns, they're the ones who are out trying to get people to pony up money. And it seems to me that if they support campaign finance, it would be in their interest to mention it to their contributors at the time. So they would be natural mouthpieces to promote the program. And I'd like to make sure that we do a good job of reaching out to them early on after they qualify to run, to make sure that they understand and make sure that they have the materials to promote the program in their campaign fundraising activities.
That would be noted. Anyone else? Do you have any other aspects of that, Mr. Floyd?
No, that's it.
All right, thank you so much. I will now move us to board amendments, agenda item number 7. For the past few weeks, Mr. Floyd and Attorney Reed have been working diligently on a number of issues, and that prompted them to review our bylaws and administrative procedures. They are submitting 3 amendments that they believe are necessary. At this point, I'll let Attorney Reed explain, starting with agenda item 7A, then he'll go through B and C.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This is a bylaw amendment. Under our bylaws, we are required, unless the board decides to waive the rules by a 2/3 vote, to consider it 2 meetings before voting on adoption. At this point, I do not feel that it is extremely urgent, so we can wait till the next meeting on bylaw amendment 2020-05. But this essentially, when we were together, we created the contradiction with our procedures on time, on some timelines on when information needed to be provided to parties. Essentially, what we would like to do is just remove any time references from the bylaws, as that is procedural in nature. We'd like to just keep that in our procedures and simply make a reference to procedures. So that's what we are doing in this bylaw. It essentially deletes language in Article 9A, subsection 9, and it simply refers to the Administrative Rules 1.03. That's all I have.
All right. Any discussion on those recommendations? Do you all feel you need a little bit more time to review these and take consideration of the recommendations before we decide if we want to take some sort of action on those, or?
John, if this is first reading, would we normally vote on it at this meeting or at the next meeting?
We would vote at the next meeting unless the board felt compelled to, and then you would have to have a procedural vote to waive the rules in which a 2/3 vote would be required, and then we would vote on the amendment as adopted. But as I said, this is not an urgent matter, so rolling it over to second reading and hearing it at the next monthly meeting, I think would be sufficient.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we'll definitely have this for a second reading at our next meeting. And I guess at this time, we will go to agenda item 8, ethics guide revision.
Mr. Chair, necessary make a motion to have it delayed, or can it just be delayed based on our current procedures? Say, here's my husband coming in to say hello.
Oh,
Hello, Steve.
Your husband.
Hello.
Hello.
Close.
For Mr. Reed, at this one, what do you,
The bylaw amendment simply rolls.
Okay,
So we don't need to take any action to table or anything. It simply rolls to another reading. But I only addressed one amendment at a time, so we haven't moved to 8 yet. We have to go to 7B. I just wanted to.
okay, oh,
I wanted
yes.
to do them separately.
Sorry about that. I was trying to rush you all out of here. Sorry about that.
I'm ready to go too. So, okay, so if I could go to the second one.
Yes, sir.
This is APA 2020-01. This amends our Rule Point 103. This deals with an issue that we would, like a self-initiated complaint. I think we found that we were running into a chicken and egg problem. If an unsworn complaint, and this is where I think I've told you before, the state doesn't do self-initiated complaints. So in a lot of ways, we are kind of starting something. We're in uncharted territory. So this may take a couple stabs for us to get it right. But if we receive an unsworn complaint, which is really any allegation that's made in writing or verbally, it gets to the ethics officer, and then we found it was stalled because the way the rules are written now, a board member has to request the closed meeting, in order to consider whether it's legally sufficient in order to move forward with the investigation. But how does it get from the ethics officer who's done the intake to one of the board members to put it here? So what we've proposed, and I've discussed this with Mr. Floyd, is that we create no discretion. Essentially, if an unsworn complaint comes in and the ethics officer determines that the allegations, if true, would warrant a violation of the ethics code, then he is required to schedule a closed session meeting no later than the next regularly scheduled meeting. And as I said, this could constitute a written or a verbal allegation that covers anything that's made through our ethics hotline. And then, of course, this is confidential, as we know, because we're still before the legal sufficiency standard. So that's what this procedure does. It fills in that gap. We found that we were having trouble connecting those two dots to get us to the closed session, and I think this just makes it a little clearer.
Mr. Chairman, two comments.
Mr. Herring, go ahead.
On line 17, where it says the ethics officer shall, I would, consistent with the way you guys have been working, I would say the ethics officer in consultation with the board attorney shall, so that it's not solely on, so that it's clear that Mr. Floyd gets to talk to somebody about it, and it's not solely on his shoulders. And then the second thing, when on line 18, when it says no later than the time of the next regularly scheduled meeting, I would say the next regularly scheduled meeting held at least 7 days or 10 days or 14 days after the complaint is received. So if a complaint comes in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and we have a meeting scheduled at 4 o'clock that same day, Mr. Floyd isn't required to put it on that agenda, with only 2 hours notice.
Okay. So in consultation with the board counsel, and then you said no sooner than.
On line 18, no later than the time of the next regular meeting scheduled at least 7 days or 10 days after the complaint is received.
Okay.
Something to provide a window there for Mr. Floyd to make this decision.
Okay, I understand. So, okay.
Because that would allow someone to play games. If the way it's worded now, I think if I really wanted to put the board through the ringer, I would make sure to always call up with my anonymous complaints 30 minutes before a board meeting and see how they handled it.
Okay. And this also makes sure we satisfy all notice requirements under state law. So,
right.
If the board would like I said, this is not an amendment that's required to roll, but we could simply table the issue, and I could bring it back next month with the changes that were proposed, or we can move forward tonight, whatever the board desires.
I would say bring back the edited version for final approval.
And Mr. Chairman, is that the direction the board wishes to take? And if so, I can move to the next amendment.
Yes, sir. I believe so.
Okay, I'll bring that back next month. Okay, next we have amendment APA 2020-02. This deals with representation of counsel of witnesses to our investigations. We do have subpoena power granted to us by ordinance, but we also have the ability to just call city employees and do preliminary investigations, which we define in our procedures as well. The question has arisen whether a city employee can be represented by the city attorney's office. I've emailed you, I think, a couple times over the last 6 weeks on this particular issue. I've consulted with everybody from the State Commission on Ethics to Jacksonville, Miami-Dade, and some city attorneys. And this is a complex issue that everybody's kind of struggled with. But I think the recommendation that we have decided to take is to follow the lead of the State Commission on Ethics, which is the witness solely decides who their attorney is to be. And if they decide that it is to be someone with the city attorney's office, that is their decision to make. And we are essentially the government engaged in an interview, and it's our decision to make. Whether a conflict of interest arises, and that was the concern we had, that burden rests on the attorney that's representing the witness. If they represent another body like the city, and there appears to be a conflict at some point during the interview, they have the ability to terminate the meeting, terminate the interview, and recommend that the witness obtain outside counsel. So this is how the State Commission does it. This is how the other boards haven't really ever had to deal with this issue before. But I think what's important is we would want to make sure that we put it on the record that the person's there as the attorney, that there is an observer. And the concern that I had was that third party, do we inadvertently waive the confidentiality by exposing it to a third party? The general consensus among the professionals I spoke with was that it does not. So I think that as long as we get them on the record that they are there as an attorney on behalf of the witness has the right to choose whoever they wish to be their attorney. That's all I have.
Mr. Chairman, one question.
Yes, sir.
On line 41, lines 40 and 41, the witnesses or the persons being interviewed who have legal counsel, the legal counsel is only an observer during the interview. Does that mean that their attorney is not going to be allowed to speak? And do we really think that there are attorneys in Tallahassee who can sit through a meeting without speaking?
That was some of my concern as well.
That's a two-part question. So yes, the first answer is yes, except for them confirming that there is counsel to the witness, they are to be an observer. It's not a deposition. They can't object to the form of a question simply as an observer like you would see in a criminal investigation and police interview. An attorney could sit there and the attorney could recommend that the meeting be ended, but they wouldn't be able to interact and ask questions. Whether the attorney can sit in a meeting and not speak, that would depend on the attorney.
So would the attorney be able to, like in a congressional hearing, maybe not question anything, but they can spend half the time whispering in the witness's ear about how the witness ought to answer? Is that going to be allowed?
I would say yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this observer thing, because
Yeah, that
most attorneys I know are not good observers.
and I guess my issue is would the individual being questioned view that attorney as a counselor or an observer, and that's my biggest issue, and that's where I get concerned about some conflict at some point, or the impartiality aspect of our board being, I guess, losing that integrity for that. So I personally have a lot of problems or issues with it, but I'm just one person to think about.
And I would like to point out that the attorney would also be bound to the confidentiality of the statute. As an attorney and officer of the court, they hold probably a higher standard than the witness is. So I think that is something to consider, that the attorneys also are going to recognize of a conflict, and the attorney's going to want to stop that and get out as quickly as possible. Nobody wants to go to the bar for something that may not be worth their license.
And I guess something I just thought about, or maybe it's not worth mentioning. I just don't want the public to think that that they can't get a fair shake when they're dealing with the ethics board, and that we're all connected. That's my biggest issue. I really just want us to maintain our impartiality. And I don't know how you do that if, okay, you're sitting with this particular attorney or the city attorney, and you just seem like we're all on the same ball team. And I don't know how the employees will be able to decipher that we're not, or the public viewing this will be able to truly trust that we're not.
No, I understand. That was an issue that we struggled with for quite some time. As you know, I think we've had numerous calls in the last 2 months over this very issue. I think that I think we have to trust, as an officer of the court, the member of the staff of the city attorney's office is going to observe the confidentiality of the interview and maintain that confidentiality.
Yeah.
And also, we are not required to go to the city attorney to schedule meetings. The Florida Bar Rule, I think, has some notes on that dealing with a government agency. You can interview staff unless they have a direct, like if they're the respondent, obviously you would need to go. I think really, if you know that the city employee is represented, you need to go to their attorney. But if they're just the city attorney and there's a city attorney's office that may or may not represent a city attorney in a particular matter, then we are not obligated to go to the city attorney first. So this procedure would only rise to when the city employee first went to the city attorney and said, "Hey, I'm being called to an interview. I would like you to be there." And the decision rests solely not with us and not with the city attorney's office, but with the person that we're calling, the city employee that we're calling as a witness.
Well, I thank you all, and I thank you, John, for all you've done in this process. I know you've reached out across the state, and you check with your colleagues. I mean, you run the gamut on this, so I really thank you for that and appreciate that, all that hard work that you've done to get us to this point when considering this.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Any questions for anyone else?
This is something we could adopt this today if the board wishes. I would make just one small recommendation. It does appear that a word got past spell check on line 17. The word make should actually say may. It says make take. It should say may take. So I would just say if a motion were to be made today, just note that correction to be made.
All right. Are there any motions to vote on this particular this 7C today, or do you all want this tabled for the next meeting as well.
Mr. Chair, I think we should have the revisions made so that we can all read and feel confident with voting or not voting in support of them at the next meeting. That makes the most sense to me.
Okay. I agree with that. So, Mr. Reed, we will take in and we will consider all three, I guess, on the same, for the same agenda item next meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. All right, that takes us to the ethics guide revision, agenda item number 8. Floyd expressed the priority of his was to revise the ethics guide. I know that he's been meeting with city employees and also members of the board, asking for our approval for a new guide. Before he speaks, I want to point out in the past that we never reviewed the ethics guide before they were presented to the public. I'd like to thank the board and city employees for giving their input. I'm hoping that we'll have a more useful guide. I believe that we will because of everyone's insight and input. So, Mr. Floyd, with that, you have the floor.
Mr. Floyd, you're muted.
I'm sorry, juggling too many things. I too want to thank the board and the employees and officials for reviewing this and give feedback. As you can see, you didn't give me a picture. I stole it from somewhere and put it in there. So if you don't like pictures that's in there, you can send me another one. Other than that, we will we'll go back and get vaccine comments for accurate target and legal staff to make sure you get that pie. In that one section, asking the board to go ahead and move it, correct. I will forward it to the city and ask that make it available to all employees. One of the reasons I'm doing that, this particular guide answers a lot of questions employees have had based on my interaction and understanding. And so I think it'd be good to make everyone aware it's there and how the board can assist them. So with that, I'm recommending the board approve the revised ethics guide pending further with reference to Mr. Bill's comments.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Payne, you recognize?
I just had one question or clarification. There are 2 addresses listed in the guide, the Renaissance Center on the cover page, and then toward the end, the City Hall address. Is that the mailing address on Adams Street? Okay.
And I have one comment, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
This is a City of Tallahassee ethics guide, and when you look at the page, I guess it would be page 2, the way they're numbered. It starts off with pictures of our elected officials. So it looks like it is a product of the City of Tallahassee rather than a product of the ethics board. And I recognize that the ethics code is more than just the board. It addresses the city actions too. Given that, I would, on the cover of this, I would put I will reference to the City of Tallahassee Ethics Board and add the date so that if there is a revision at any point, we could have, revised and a date right on the front cover, and it would be very easy to tell the old one from the new one. But I think it's important right up front that we make it clear that this is a board product and not a city product.
It does say on the cover that it's revised September 15th, 2020.
Well, I'm looking at the page that's kind of gray, and it's got the star in the top corner. It says City of Tallahassee Ethics Guide, a guide for Tallahassee residents and city employees, and that's all that's on it. Right. I was talking about this page.
Yeah.
So I realize that's if this is the cover, I would put that information on this also.
Okay.
If this is the cover, then I'm fine. And Miss Graham, you're muted. You're still muted.
Oh, and everyone wants to hear my voice. I know y'all are dying to hear me again. Which is the cover? Oh, that's just the question. I was asking the obvious question. Because I had two different documents, and one had been revised and one was the earlier one. So was there a change, Dwight? Is that the cover? No?
What I read is the cover. Chris is the third page.
And actually, given Richard's point, I actually did think the same thing when I saw the pictures of the city commission and the mayor. Do you think there might be some confusion as to who was responsible for this document? Because certainly we, as the independent ethics board, we certainly want to be the entity with which people associate this ethics document with. And as we move forward, and I'm really concerned about the confusion that's going to result with this inspector general. I think we've got to make sure that folks are aware that we are the independent entity with which to have ethics issues addressed.
For me to strike the picture of the board, this picture at this moment, would that be in order?
I don't know. I don't know what, Kristen, I don't know if other people kind of had that same, I did, but it wasn't that big of a deal for me. But again, my bigger concern is what we have coming down, which is the inspector general. I'm sorry, I'm going off a little bit off topic, but is the inspector general, where are they? Is he or she? I know it's going to be the same person that's the auditor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Which I think is a he, right?
Yes.
Is that currently already in effect, or is it still working its way through? Who knows?
I believe it'll be voted on the next meeting. The ordinance was introduced at the last city commission meeting.
Yeah, so one of our greatest challenges as we move forward is going to be that there is going to be another entity with which someone who had an ethics complaint could approach. And we're going to need to, at every opportunity, stress that we are the only independent entity dealing with ethics. Again, this whole process has been unfortunate, but it is what it is. So it's going to be our obligation, our responsibility to define the difference.
Order, I'd like to make a motion to strike the picture here. I'm okay with the rest of the wording about our mission statement and stuff like that. But if that needs to be a motion, then I'd like to motion. If it's a suggestion, then I can email it to Mr. Floyd later.
Yeah, I think that would just be a recommendation. I suppose that I would like to, I guess, strike through and send back to you.
Okay.
And I'm also in favor, even though it's not a vote, I would be in favor of maybe a skyline picture as opposed to the picture of the commission. Especially, I think one of those may not even be current anymore. One of those
Right.
members. So, and it'll be an active document. So I would want it to be current. So, and anything can change, and I don't have to go back and change a picture all the time. So I think a city skyline or city hall or whatever else would probably be more appropriate. And then again, back to Mr. Herring's point and Ms. Graham's point, it doesn't seem like we would be an independent entity if you look at this. It just seems as though here's another branch of the city leadership tree, and we're not on that with them, not in that capacity. So I think that's something we should really consider.
I do want to recognize Dwight. I had been up in the mountains of North Carolina for a couple weeks and came back and took another look at it. I think it's a wonderful product, Dwight. You've done a great job. We're just fine tuning it now. I do think that it's going to be our obligation. Don't mean to be repeating myself, but I am concerned about confusion and as we move forward. So whatever we can do to make sure that the independence of this body. Okay, I'm looking at it. Yes.
Do you want to make this page?
Yes. Yes, that would be.
Yeah.
Right now, third page, but it becomes a page.
Yeah, I think, you could recognize the city commission, like maybe on page one, the numbered page one, to recognize that the mayor and commission stepped up and passed the city ethics ordinance. I mean, I think they definitely deserve credit for that, but I think it would be less confusing to say that the board recognizes the leadership role that they played in adopting the ordinance.
I think it's necessary to mention them at all. That voted on in general, they just approved it, but the city, it gives them more clout, feeling like they did it, not that it still had to go in front of the board.
What I do, I've changed that picture to a skyline, and it's now the third on the front cover, which is I suggest that we keep the organization values that is to the ethics.
This is something that's going to be online, correct, Dwight?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's something that we can make changes to if we deem necessary.
Yes.
Okay. I wouldn't be printing them out.
Yeah, and Gwen, in relation to your last comments, I would think that at some point, based on the work that Dwight and John are doing with the Inspector General, that there would be maybe a page or two related to the relationship between the Inspector General and the Independent Ethics Board, to make it very clear to somebody who would pick this up what the two roles and the difference between the two roles are.
Right.
Because that's not defined really right now, but that would be an important part of this guide, in my view.
Right, 100%. And we as board members really need to understand the difference, as people are going to have questions about this. We need to be able to answer them. Again, it's the duplicity of this is unnecessary, but it is what it is.
And I think something key is just being a true community member, is that it's going to be key that we address these complaints in a timely manner. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. If we let these drag on, the fact that we're about one from November of 2019, that's kind of embarrassing, but it's still something that I understand the reason why for the extension of time. But I think overall we need to address these. If we're going to put timelines in here and say 90 days and 180 days and things like that, I think that's what the community is relying on, that we will take their complaints to heart and that we will address them and see if they're valid. If so, that we actually act on them and that we don't just put them on the back burner for a long time.
I agree with you, Kristen. I agree. And I think we're getting there. I mean, I think we're going to start the new year in a much better place than we've been in the past. However long I've been on the board, it's been my lifetime, right? I mean,
You're only 7. Okay.
it's been a while. But anyway, I do think you're coming on at a time where we're making so many positive changes, and we'll be in a position to address these issues in a more timely manner. We've had a lot going on, unfortunately, in the last year that's now behind us, other than COVID, of course.
And I have made a note, a recommendation to bring it back, so there are a number of changes. We can go, I'll go ahead and between Inspector General and the ethics. Anything else?
You know what? Hey, well, get ready for this next round with the ethics course. So he faded out.
I'm so glad I did part on this.
Dwight's microphone's a little bit choppy. Does everyone else hear that, or is it just me?
Yeah, I'm hearing that as well.
That might be something to address.
I'm at my wit's end with all of this.
Make it
I would
progress.
take masks and 6 feet socially distanced. I'm ready any time.
Okay,
All right. Yeah, you're a little choppy, but we'll get it together. All right, now we will move to new ethics course.
Okay, can you hear me?
Right now,
Yeah.
you will,
Hello.
you're
We hear you
going
now.
in and out.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Back the clerk to you all. You all asked to see the pre-post test items. I shared them with, got feedback on those. Also shared them with employees. We got a number of volunteers. We went through CEOs, items, and it will probably be ongoing as we move forward with training. This meet requirement for new employees, and we talk at least once each month.
The coast and saying there, right? This is for the Mobile, the Gulf Shores, the Pensacola area. It'll take until the wee hours of Wednesday to get that center to even approach the rest of the way with the landfall.
Trying to see where that's coming from.
I have some bad background noise on my end.
We're talking 5
Base.
wind gusts peaking sometime Wednesday morning, and when you look at
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Anyway, it's the test, modifying test ongoing project. I'll be teaching on a monthly basis starting this month, and to assist with new employees. And I'm submitting you all for adoption as your first course, first mini hope, with the idea that as we move forward, and even as I become more familiar with the Tallahassee and the ordinances that are we'll change this in the course as we progress. Yes.
So it's my understanding that today you're asking for a course approval.
Yes, sir.
So are there any questions or comments concerning Mr. Floyd? Were you all able to hear him okay?
Forgot I did need to note that at our last Ms. Suggested that we add something on social media, which we did on page 5.
Yeah, Mr. Floyd, I think it's not just your video that's breaking up. I think it's the I'm not just your audio, it's the video too. It's just kind of chopping in and out. So at some point, maybe it's worth the board's money to get a better, webcam or whatever on your end, hardware on your end.
I think you've done a great job on this, Mr. Floyd, and I move that we approve your course.
Second.
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion to approve the course by Ms. Costa, and it was initially seconded by Mr. Herring. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. So again, thank you, Mr. Floyd, for your hard work, and we look forward to hearing the results and getting some sort of post-assessment of this course once you're done. All right. Next on the agenda is the contractual agreement for investigative services. Again, Mr. Floyd, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is a contractual agreement between the board and the integrity group. This you received, it was presented to us a proposal, and our effort here is to for our investigators timely. If, for instance, with more to get, I will continue to be primary, but I think with something that might be in depth, then I would call on them for assistance. One of we do have benchmarks. For example, they reach a certain amount, there to inform us, and we get enough, and at that point we want them to continue, or we're at the point to possibly draw conclusions. You can see from the proposal, the primary investigator group is Eric Miller, is qualified over years experience. This type specifically, so he understands the type of information out. And I just want to make you all aware of this agreement as we move forward.
Yeah, I think for a long time, for years, we've talked about the fact that we would need this kind of resource at some point. And I'm very familiar with Mr. Miller's work in the past, as well as Mr. Yates and Mr. Moore. And I think we've got these guys are just have impeccable credentials to be doing the kind of stuff that we would ask them to be doing. I think it would add great credibility to whatever our final decision would be in any ethics complaint.
Ms. Graham, were you saying something?
I agree. Good people involved. I know some of these folks as well. Good people. Dwight, Mr. Floyd, have you worked with this group before?
Well, I worked for him directly at FLE or indirectly years ago. So mostly him and related. The rest of them, some of them I know by name.
Right.
They were when I was looking for someone, recommended, they actually called me based on a third party's recommendation. And I was very pleased because Mr. said, I thought that they were incredibly being questioned about their work or the objectivity. So very pleased to have that.
Can I ask what the process would be, Mr. Floyd, if you felt that you needed to engage them? Would it be something you brought to the board in advance, or would that be your independent decision?
I would confer with the chair.
Okay. All right, Brian, it's all up to you then.
Well, I'm in favor of it. So, am I muted?
Yeah, no, you're not. I hear you.
All right.
Okay, I just was curious about that because this would obviously be an additional expense.
Right.
That's the process that's in place. That makes sense. We don't want to delay. As to Ms. Costa's point,
Right.
put some fire under our wheels here.
And it was a July
Yeah.
meeting. It might be, but you authorize the chair to make these decisions. So we appreciate.
Okay.
Do we need to do anything on this, Dwight? We need to make a motion?
This was an FYI.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to go back on mute again. Bye.
All right. And I think that takes us to another informational item, agenda number 11, termination of services.
Yes, sir.
So,
First of all, the letter was dated in June, but I actually did not see it until July, after July's meeting. Because we're not in the office every day, we'll have to really come in and check the mail. But people, all his contract, and a party will talk him out of it. However, he said he was retiring. I was not going to grab his pants leg and try to hold on once he said retiring. I did to make the aware and let him know we appreciate his services. He's contributed quite a bit over time. But I read a lot of documentation, and he contributed to the board and make sure the board had the moment to recognize him and him.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes,
would, something short of a motion, but I would suggest that maybe Mr. Floyd and Mr. Reed could prepare a letter for your signature to Mr. Claypool, thanking him for his service to the board and just showing some appreciation to him, because he did help us very much with the last round of policies, procedures, administrative procedures, and rules. He really ponied up and brought a lot of his state experience, I think, and made our last round of major revisions much better.
yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. And so, Mr. Reed, Mr. Floyd, you all could get on that, and I would sign it.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments related to this matter? All right. That takes us to public comments on non-agenda items. At this time, we will hear public comment on non-agenda items if we have any speakers. Mr. Floyd, are there any additional speakers?
No, sure. Additional speakers.
Okay, well, moving right along. Member discussion for future agenda items. Agenda item 13. Do we have any issues or any agenda items that you all would like to see included for the next meeting or subsequent meetings? Okay, any directives for us to send out to the board, to the staff? Only thing I can remember is that we all will agree to have something to Mr. Floyd if we have any recommendations within the next may compile that document by the end of the month. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, so, well,
Second.
right, it's 5:36 p.m. Meeting is adjourned. Remain safe and sound. You all take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.